Welcome back to another episode of Wonderful Wednesdays with Wendi. I am your host, Wendi from Mission Empower. Mission Empower is a community parent resource center in Erie County, Pennsylvania. And in order to help service our community better, we have this Zoom platform during the COVID, which we are having interviews with leaders in our community. Today we have Curtis Jones on today from what all the places, Curtis?
Just a hometown boy who loves his hometown. How about that?
Yes.
And not just the city, but the county and the region. I've branched out. I'll even go to Union City. How about that?
I know. So
yeah.
Yep.
I'll just say that I do. I have part of my career was with Mission Empower for about 8 years, doing advocacy and training and some work in a variety of areas there. Right now, doing a lot of consulting work and professional speaking work through LLC that I started last year, and also I'm a local pastor. So, like all of the work that I'm doing in community is really about helping build our community, grow our community, unify our community. And so I think these conversations that we're having, whether it's with me on these types of topics or content, whether it's with NAMI or whether it's with some other nonprofit service organization that you're, communicating and interviewing, I think it's all part of a process to do a couple things. One, let the community know what's out there, and then two, find ways to connect what's out there. Erie County has no shortage of programs and great organizations and great individuals, but we do have a connection problem. We don't connect the dots well. So we'll have organization or a family that needs advocacy with their child who is in special education, but won't know about Mission Empower, but will know about another organization, but won't know about. And so we have to really use these platforms to have significant conversation, significant connection, and really use them almost as marketing opportunities for other nonprofits, so that we can have our community members that need our services to have them available for them. Yeah, so
I absolutely agree with you. So today we are continuing our discussion on the what race are you in? So explain your play on words for us.
Yeah, so the world we're living in now has not only become COVID or Corona crazy. We've had the significant racial issues and injustices that have been highlighted again through the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The mantra of "I can't breathe." Regrettably, was not the first time that we've heard that, but it really caught fire this time. And I think, this is not a political statement at all, but I think the COVID world, the Trump world, / presidential election world, as well as the highlighting of this injustice that was brought to light again through the George Floyd situation, made us, the world look at things differently, made us look at things in a unique way, or maybe make this generation look at things that the previous generations have already experienced. So the play on words is what race are you in? Race is really, and I'm gonna get over into it, but race is more of a social construct to try to class and organize people in a way that has maybe their external characteristics, i.e. skin color, as a predominant identifier. So that's where the concept of race comes from. It's made up. So that's the play on words. What race are we in? So either the black race, the white race, the Hispanic race, or how about let's have a conversation about the human race and find our commonalities in our likenesses and our connections. Because truthfully, if you're the right blood type for me and you need blood or I need blood, I can get it from you. I can get a blood transfusion from blood that you've donated. So at the core and on the inside of us, even though we're different externally, many times we're very different or very much the same internally. And so the human race is the race that we want to talk about. And also the race of getting ourselves to be a part of a community that is recognizing of differences, but doesn't allow those differences to be the preeminent factor to determine how I treat you or how we treat each other. You know, and so I think it's beautiful to recognize variety, but I also think that it's not okay to say that one difference makes you better or worse than another list of characteristics. So that's kind of the play on words with what race are you in, and if we're not careful, we'll be talking about a race that's a fictitious thought versus the actual reality of our human race, our humanity, and the effort that we're putting forth to make this world the best that we can make it. That beloved community that Dr. King talked so articulately about years ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been doing so much research, so much investigation, so much just trying to educate myself because, you know, I am a white female. So my universe is vastly different, my everyday normal. So I think it's really important that we have these discussions. You and I have had the discussion about lots of things. So
Sure.
where are we kicking this off? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I think, you know, these are the kind of conversations that have to happen, and they have to be able to happen in an environment that's a safe space for everyone that's
involved. You always
involved.
make everybody feel safe. You are very accommodating, and you have a way with words of bringing people together and uniting. So how are we going to do that?
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, but here's the thing. I'm a limited resource.
Yeah.
You're a limited resource.
Yeah.
You know, Zoom, 3 o'clock with Wonderful Wednesdays with Wendi, Woteki. Oh, that's a lot of alliteration, by the way. Like, whoa, 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 W crazy. But if we have spots of opportunities that are safe, we've always had that. What we have to transition to is making available more safe spaces, safe spaces in common everyday conversations, in workplaces, in churches, in organizations. For example, in a Mission Empower, that's mission is more directed to working with families and youth who are in special education and receive special education services and doing advocacy and working to help provide the necessary accommodations for, you know, students to get a free and appropriate public education, right? But connected to that, there's a diversity of clientele and employees that are a part of the Mission Empower family. And so we cannot just do our little thing and think that the rest of the world is not happening around us. And many times, some of our students, some of their issues and families' concerns are related to ethnic differences, linguistic differences, not just special education concerns, but new American families, or some of the nuance of being an African American family in a predominantly all-white school district, or all-white administrative school district, or an urban versus rural mindset and suburban mindset. So those are all conversations that need to happen and be able to provide safe spaces for these types of conversations. So they're hard to have, but they're necessary to have.
I will tell you, Curtis, in my experience here, we are starting to get the international and non-English speaking families, but we seldomly get contacted by those urban families. And I don't know if that's because they're unaware of our services. I don't know if that's because parents don't understand that they do have rights and responsibilities for their child's special education. I don't know where the disconnect is right there. And that's a curiosity to me. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of factors in play. You know, I can't, you know, in any way speak for every African American Black person in Erie, in the city of Erie. But what I can speak to is, you know, some of my experience working at Mission Empower and working in social services in general, is that a lot of times there's a level of mistrust of systems, and you know, sometimes an organization like Mission Empower or Sarah Reed or another group are seen very much like the school district that this parent is having a problem with. And so it's these folks are working together with those folks about our family. And when I was growing up, my parents used to say, you know, you keep family business in the house. You don't go around telling them people your business. And so you're also fighting some of those nuances and kind of uh, ethnic traditions that are different. You know what I mean, right? And so
Right,
then
right.
I think another dynamic is a lack of wisdom or lack of knowledge of the availability of a mission in power, for example, and also the fact that parents have rights and students have rights, not just as a general student in a school district or in a school facility, but a student that is in special education has another level of significant rights that the parents and the family can access to make sure that that free and appropriate public education is provided for them in the proper manner. And so I think there is a mistrust issue, a lack of clarity issue on rights, but also I think, again, an ignorance of knowing what's out there. And so these are, again, whether it's these conversations or whether there's some marketing strategies put in place to kind of ingratiate and make those relationships more available to broader, community members. I think those are things that need to be done intentionally. And I think that speaks to one of the issues or one of the concerns that I think, on the topic of what race are you in, and how can we build a more unified and collaborative community, is intentionality. Whatever you really want to happen, you're going to have to be intentional about it, or it won't be consistent. And so, you know, just to be elementary for a moment about it, a white person and a black person could have a conversation in passing in the elevator, and that's wonderful. But if you go back to your predominantly black world or your predominantly white world and never to mix again, except on accident, it's a nice moment, but it's not transformative and it's not intentional. And so I think we have to begin to have intentional conversations with people that are different than us, whether that's ethnically, racially, for lack of a better term, financially, demographically, urban and rural, all of those kinds of things. We have to be very intentional about making those happen.
So I know personally speaking, I was thinking, but I don't know how to do it, was like, okay, so I know there's the Lower East Side Coalition, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if they would be interested in me coming and telling them about my services. I don't know what their main objective is in that coalition. I don't know who to reach out to even speak to you about those kinds of things. I don't know where to move and reach and touch yet. So I guess that's a huge conversation to have as well, because obviously I'm looking at trying to address different financial levels, different ethnicities, and also rural versus city. I would really like to become more impactful in the city because I think there's a huge need, but I don't know where to go. So if you are in another nonprofit or in social services whatsoever, how do you do that? Who is a good jumping off spot to go visit? Like, how do we start?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? So Mission Empower already has a database of previous and current clients and families that we're working with that may be different than what I don't know why I keep referencing NAMI, but for example, a NAMI or another organization, the ARC or something, another organization in the county, there's probably some overlap in families and in clients, but there's also a lot of people that aren't familiar with Mission Empower who are familiar with Sarah Reed, right? And so I think there's some interagency collaborations that need to happen, like these phone calls or these sessions, finding those coalitions in the community that already have a platform and have a base of groups that come to it. I don't know if there's some kind of a group that brings the nonprofit world together, not around funding, around program collaboration, which is a little bit different, right? And so I think those are some things that need to be done. And here's another thing. Sometimes a group doesn't know that they need you until you tell them what you have. So
Right.
it's the East Side Coalition, the West Side, our West Bayfront organization. There's schools in that area, Strong Vincent, Emerson Gridley, the school there is all in that Our West Bayfront. And so if they're looking to meet needs, maybe they don't know they need Mission Empower until you tell them what Mission Empower has to offer. And then they're like, oh my goodness, we have 8 families that we know of that came to us about this concern. And so you're there. So just being, again, expanding your comfort zone. Don't give boundaries to where you sell and where you show. I had an old friend used to say, you got to tell it to sell it. You got to make them know it to grow it. You know what I mean? And so I think you have to be, again, that's intentional, and not looking for just for other nonprofits, going in and saying, hey, you're a significant business in this area. Can we put some of our nonprofit brochures into your lobby or whatever it might be, you know? So really branching out. And again, this is connected to expanding, you know, Mission Empower's footprint and organizational footprint and impact, but also it's the same principle as we're talking about, you know, being intentional to branch out into other demographics, into a place where, you know, you wouldn't normally go, but you go there intentionally because you want to expand your comfort zone and be more inclusive.
Do you think, or can assume a little bit, that it would be easier, in fact, for me to reach out into the city than the city to reach out into the country? Do you know what I mean? So we're talking about me doing a lot of reaching, and I'm gonna reach.
Yeah. Well, here's another thing. I think it goes back to intentionality, and I know I'm using that word a lot, but that's my buzzword for today, is being intentional. One of the biggest things for us to really keep in mind is that change can be difficult. Nuance, expanding out, for example, you know, a more urban experienced person going into a rural environment, it's uncomfortable for the rural environment, and it's uncomfortable for the person coming out of the urban core, right? And so, but sometimes you just have to do it. Also, there are times when you need a segue person, you need a connector, right? And so if you want to get into, let's just say you want to get into inner city Erie, predominantly African-American community, urban community, yes, as a white person, you should jump in there and go too. But there are also opportunities where you can connect with people that are already trusted in those communities, in those demographics of our broader community. And sometimes it's the best thing you can do is find who's the connector, and they'll segue you in. When I was doing some community work years ago in the Girard Lake City area, I was looking to do some projects. It's like 10 years ago or more, looking to do some projects with youth out there, and was looking at doing this and that. And I just thought it was a great space, small space. You could, you know, start easily. And I'm just kind of naive, and I'm jumping out there and I'm talking to people. They're like, I don't know you, you know. And what I found was that it wasn't that they were just so. It wasn't just that it was a black guy coming out into the county. It was like, we didn't know you, black or white. Like, you're a cityite, you're a city person. You know what I mean? And it was not just, you know, ethnic or skin tone. It was language, right? It was the mindset. You know, like I said before, they were shooting guns out at their family property, at their own family's property gun range. I'm ducking because I don't know. This is not normal for me, right? So what I did was I found people that I knew in that neighborhood that lived in Lake City in particular and lived in Girard. And I said, hey, who do you know that I can come and talk to about this idea? And they segued me into the community, and they brought me in, and I was able to do a lot of significant work there and had some great activities. And then here's what I found out. One day I was, a quick story, then we can move on, but I think it speaks to how important it is to get out of or expand that comfort zone and have those segue. I was at a friend's house, a couple, and the police drove by. And so like the Lake City police officer drove by and was like, woo, woo, hit the lights, sped up on the side of the curb. And I'm like, oh man, this is my first time coming out here for dinner. Oh man, racial profiling, all this stuff, right? I'm really like on 10. And this happened to be a white couple that I was there having dinner with. And so The officer gets on the mic and says, "Curtis Jones, what are you doing out here in Girard and in Lake City?" And I was like, oh my God, you know my name? Oh, this is really a problem. And I looked, and the officer was a guy I went to high school with,
Oh, nice.
who Dave Wizakowski, who was a good friend. I probably shouldn't say his name, but I used to call him the Wiz. I said, Dave, you mad at me? I still owe you $10 from freshman year because you bought me a Bart Simpson t-shirt on a basketball trip. And he's like, that's exactly why I pulled over. And so what I found out was that being able to segue into unusual or different communities, you'll find that there's more commonality than you know. I didn't know Dave worked out there. I hadn't seen Dave in 15 years, but he recognized me. I saw him. We had a reunion, and it further helped to strengthen my connection in that part of the county. So I tell that story. Hopefully, it was a little bit of humor related to it, but also it's an example of being willing to branch out, get into unusual areas, and we will often find out there's more common, or we have more in common, or we have more connection than we know on the surface. So yeah, we got to branch out. We got to be intentional. We have to get segues into communities where we aren't maybe used to being. And then I will say this too, because I'm edgy at times. Sometimes you just got to splash in the water and do a cannonball. Like, you're not ready for me, but I need to get you exposed to something different. And so you have to use some wisdom, but I think there's a continuum of ways of doing this thing, and finding what the right way is to do it, I think, is important.
Jessica, I have to get the door. Brittany's locked out. So can you ask questions for a second? Or Patty, do you want to talk to Curtis real quick?
Hey, Curtis.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Don't know if you're
wonderful.
We went to school together too.
Yeah. Well, I think you lit up when I talked about high school.
I know. I was like, yeah, I remember Mike.
That's cool. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's again a great example. Remember the movie? Was it? I think it might have been a Will Smith movie years ago. Like it talks about 6 degrees of separation, or the concept of 6 degrees of separation. And in Erie, not just the city, but like Erie County, it's like 1 degree. Like either you're related to them, or you went to school with them, or their cousin was your friend that you didn't know that they was their cousin. You know what I mean? And so I think Erie's unique because we're big enough to have big city challenges and the rest of the world challenges, but we're also small enough to do something about it. You know what I mean? Some of these issues are similar to what they have going on in Atlanta or Dallas or LA or Chicago, but we have our size or our proportion version of that, but we're small enough to really do something about it. You know what I mean? And just these kinds of conversations are intentional and purposeful, and sometimes they have to be edgy. Sometimes you have to say, as a white man, I don't feel comfortable walking into a group of black men that I don't know, not because I'm afraid they're gonna rob me. I just don't know them. I don't know if they think I'm like a racist because they think all white people are racist. Like, there's some real candid conversations and dialogue that needs to happen. We have to know that students who are in special education and in general ed, that are maybe black students or Hispanic students, are coming from a home where their parents had horrible school experiences because they were, they're like my age. I'm 44, almost 45, can't believe it. But maybe back in the 80s, they had horrible experiences with a teacher who had a disproportionate number of black students or brown or Hispanic students that they paddled because they were still paddling in the 80s in public schools in Erie, right? And so like they bring that and they give that and pass that down to their children, nieces and nephews. We have to be intentional to break some of that fallow ground up. And I think we do that by saying, man, that's crazy. I honor the fact that you're really uncomfortable, and I appreciate you telling me that, because here's the thing. We hide, and whatever your secrets are, they make you sick, right? And so I'm going to assume, if you don't tell me different, if you're uneasy walking through my group, I'm going to assume you don't like my group. But I really might be very wrong. You might be saying, oh, I'm not worthy of this group. Like, what are they? Maybe they don't like me. I don't know. So dialogue opens up those doors, opens up those channels. And I think we can really make great things happen. But it's not going to be easy. That's part of why I wore my t-shirt today. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little glare out here. It's not my best color, but better every day. Like, we got work to do every day. I might not get it all done by today, but I can have made some strides today. And if we do better every day, we'll ultimately get to that place where we'll look back and we'll have more victories under our belt than we had before. You know, so I'm just kind of on my ramble a little bit, because again, this is the only way things are going to happen, and we have to, again, be intentional. There's a spectrum of ways to do it, you know, from the extreme of jumping in the water cannonball to the slow walk, hey, Hakuna Matata, come together. Like, there's some things in between there that I think are very effective ways of breaking down walls, and again, being intentional. You're muted, which I normally wouldn't mind you being muted, but I just want to hear what you're saying. But
I'm going to go back and tell a quick story of day one, you and me at Emerson Gridley.
Okay.
So, as nobody knows about Emerson Gridley has some beautiful programming for our city youth. And I would say that there's a lot of diversity. And I walk in with you. They've got your trust. You had to pass that on to me. You had to tell them that it was okay and that I was okay, or I was going to get nowhere with those kids. And that's kind of the things that I'm talking about. Like, how do we do that without having to have that, you know, because it puts a lot of work on the community leaders like you to pass that trust. But then you have to find trusted partners that you're willing to pass that trust, or then your word is dog. So how do you, being a community leader, your ministry has lots of diversity. I know you passed that baton to me, and those kids are good with me right now. But if you weren't that trusted member of your community and passed that on to me, and now I'm a trusted member of their community, but how do we do this on a larger scale as an individual, not at work, but if, you know, in your ministry, out in the community?
Great. How about this? You have two children. You have two children. Wonderful kids, right?
Yep.
They act like, well, never mind. I was gonna say they kind of act like you sometime, but I'll leave that alone. But guess what? You have two children that you all live in the more rural part of our county.
Yeah.
There's some intentional things that you can do, whether that's sports that have a more universal connection with kids, and you know, you swing a bat when you play baseball or softball.
You know what they did?
You're in the rural, whether you're in Union City or City of Erie, you still swing a bat.
But you know what they did? We have to drive in the county. We have to drive an hour south. I'm not kidding you, to play baseball and football. They don't want us playing the city schools. We don't play in the city. They're keeping us out of the city. I can't understand how we're going to profit.
And so that's the problem. When there is intention, I had a family, friend of mine, neighbor here in our garden, right next door, over the driveway, said the same thing. They'll go to Pittsburgh. They're playing parochial school league or a parochial school locally. They'll go to Pittsburgh versus playing a city school.
Why?
or a city what do they call them, intramural or AAU team. And
but why?
I could extrapolate why I think why, but here's the thing: we have to make that unacceptable, and unless you have a legitimate and valid reason, it can't be. Because here's the irony: they'll go to Pittsburgh and play a city team in Pittsburgh versus a city team right here in Erie.
I know.
And so we have to, again, be intentional. Here's something, and I know this is hard. This is, we don't want to always put our children involved in our demonstrations and protests, but your dollars not letting your son play in that baseball league and others in your area, because we want to be able, because these are the kids they're going to go to high school with. These are going to be the other kids they're going to work with. They're going to be making their friend groups, their peer groups, their professional work relationships, not with folks in Pittsburgh, ideally, because we want to keep our brain trust of wonderful kids here, right? But if we're not intentional at home, there's a biblical passage, and I'm not going to get into like religion, but ancient book says that love starts at home and then is spread abroad, right? And so we have to show love in our own area and then branch out. Why is it that they go and do an hour south? I can't speak to that with purity and evidence, but I would say that you should challenge that they do it and make them tell you a legitimate reason. Make them say it's because X, Y, and Z, and then maybe you might be able to discern whether that's kind of not really, that doesn't sound accurate. Well, how about the kids that are 20 minutes away? Can we go in and work with that team or play that team? And it gets our students, how can I say it? It broadens who they are.
Absolutely.
I had a teacher, my first high school football coach, and I'll say his name. He was like, if you're Erie, like city of Erie public school person, you'll know like the Costello family in sports, whether it's wrestling or football. And Ron Costello, he said, football is not about life. He said, football is not about a game or just a sport. Football is about life. You learn how to get smacked in the mouth. Use the old football coach language when they grab you by your face mask and rip your head off. And he said, football is about life. You're learning how to get hit and get back up. You're learning how to interact with people and trust people that you have not previously trusted because you have a common goal. You're learning to trust that the linemen, because I was a running back, the linemen are going to open up an alley that you're going to run through that 4-hole because that's where the play is going. You're trusting that they're going to do their job, right? And so we have to trust that we are putting ourselves in situations where we have a job to do and that we're going to do it. And you build that trust and this is full circle. I wasn't just rambling. Coming back to trust. I was able to segue something, not because I knew those children and those students when I walked in. I knew one or two, but there are 15, 30, 40 children that we're interacting with a couple times a week. I had to build that myself. Mm-hmm. And so just because I was a black man and a city guy, that didn't get me trust. I had to earn it. Just because I introduced you and said, hey, if you disrespect Miss Wendi, you disrespected me. You know I don't get down like that. We had to use my little slang and colloquialism, right? I don't get down like that. That's not how we do it. So you mistreat her, you're mistreating me, and I'm not having it. That's fine, but then you had to do something to merit that. And that's your intentional concern. Whether it's you bring in a candy bag till they trust you enough to not bring a candy bag, right? Whatever it is, the trust doesn't come just from the segue. Once you get the segue into the room, you have to do something to build that trust yourself. And what I've found is that, remember, when many of those children were not African American. Several of them were white students, Caucasian students, whatever the politically correct term is these days, right? And then there were new American students, and one of our most challenging students was a new American student, and he thought he was the coolest thing around. And when I pulled him off to the side and talked to him, young man to younger man, I could break through some of that stuff, but it was a trust. He had to trust that he could let his guard down, his facade down, and actually listen, because he was known to be the class clown, the disruptor. And so those are really legitimate things of building trust. Yes, we have to have segues, yes, but then you have to earn that and facilitate and manage and increase that trust by your own action. I could bring all of you on this call that I see, I don't know how many or 3 white women, wonderful sisters of mine. I could take you all to an all-black environment, and guess what? These are my girls, these are my sisters. I'm hugging you all. We're like, oh, well, we love you, Kurt. We love them. But if I leave, or if I'm standing, y'all start using some racial slurs that were not the best language to use, or start giving some bougie, I'm white, you're black. I'm being candid and, fun, but get it. Many of truth has been told in jest, right? So I'm bougie, oh my God, you're not Curtis, I don't like you. I segued you, but you didn't earn the facilitated trust, like the continual trust of that group. And so trust is a constantly developed, constantly earned thing. I had to gain their trust every day I went in that classroom, because their world changed so much since the last time I saw them that they had to re-up the relationship. That's why it's so hard sometimes with our students that are in special education, and any of our students that are in school, because their life experience are so challenging. They're so parentified, and they're the adult at home and bringing, you know, younger siblings to school and being responsible for them. Then you want them to sit down and listen to you, but they're the adult like figure in home, or bringing, again, younger siblings to school. So you have to re-earn that every day, and it's hard to do that because you have a curriculum to teach. You have programs you need to facilitate. But in order to break that down and get to the point where you can teach, where you can relate, where we can be one, you have to keep doing the work. And so it is with a lot of our ethnic challenges and struggles that we're dealing with, is that we have to become one. We have to become one, but it's going to take continual work. Yes, I got along, you know, with Patty today, wonderful white woman. But guess what? We need to talk again tomorrow. And then at some point, I need to introduce her to my son. And then you know what I mean? Like, I need to, and then it becomes, she's not white, even though I recognize her whiteness. I'm walking because regrettably, my battery is dying. I thought I had enough juice, so I'm going to get a charger. Your whiteness, my blackness, your brownness, your tanness, your maleness, your femaleness, your socioeconomic spectrum, those things become irrelevant. They become components of who we are, but it doesn't make you and I less or better than one another. And when we can start to live like that, operate like that, organically, I don't have to fake it. Oh, that's my friend. She's cool. She's white, but she's cool. Or he's black and he's cool. Or I've got black friends. I've got white friends. I'm not a racist. When we start having all those kinds of conversations, we can have legitimate dialogue where we are all growing, and our community is not running from difference, but embracing it. Anything you embrace, you don't have to talk about it all the time. I don't have to, you know what I mean? Of course, you should tell your children you love them and all that, but you are showing them love. You're operating and living in love. And I shouldn't have to, you know, there's ways of doing what I'm saying. Again, I feel like I'm getting a little preachy, and I don't want to do that. And I know our time is getting a little closer to being done. But it has to be intentional. We have to break walls down because we're trying to break them down. And when we do that, then I think we will see a lot of the change that we want to see in our community today. But everybody has to do it. White, black, male, female. It can't be a bunch of white folks now feeling bad because they've had white privilege all their life and they had an epiphany that, no, I didn't have slaves, but my great, great, great did. And so somehow I'm benefiting. Well, I get it. But anything you do out of guilt wears out. Any behavior change you make out of like a current moment of sadness and guilt, that's not sustainable. So we need to grow relationships, not based on guilt or fear or shame, because guess what? There was a lot of folks that were involved in slavery. Africans on the continent sold other tribes because we all have some human issues that we need to deal with. But the truth of the matter is that we all also have a responsibility and an ability to grow from that and to leave the mistakes, acknowledge them because we don't want to repeat them. But at the same time, we don't have to live in that same space. We don't have to live in that same low vibration and low mindset. You know what I mean? And so, again, that's intentional. And it seems sometimes so simple, but it's the hardest thing to do because it just sounds like you would do that. That's how you operate. Like you would do something intentionally, right? Like that's language that we know to use in business. We know to use with our students. We know you intentionally tell your child to clean up that room. Like that's a real thing. But it's the same thing that we need to do with our relationships and to the ways that we grow our community. And I'll close with this for my part. I think that because of the uniqueness of the time we're in, the uniqueness of the season we're in, we had the George Floyd situation. We have a presidential election, and I'm not being political, but I think if you study history, there are significant things that happen in relation to major elections.
Absolutely.
What's the economic situation? What's the situation of the economy? There's a direct correlation to trauma and different things that happen. You know, Abraham Lincoln said, if there's any other way I can save the Union, besides freeing all the slaves, I would. And that's not an over criticism of him, but I'm saying he did what he did partially because it had a bigger interest.
Right.
There was a bigger thing involved. And so here's what we need to do. They're in Mississippi taking down flags and Confederate flags down and all of that stuff. And I think that has its place because of what it represents on some level. And it's showing the sensitivity of more people in the country recognize, well, maybe I don't mean it that way, but if a majority of people or a significant part of our national community sees it as that, then guess what? We need to do something about it. And that's intentional. Again, this presidential election, the COVID, like this pandemic, this is different. You know, we haven't had anything like this in modern history. And so we've had a George Floyd-like situation, but not in a shelter-in-place time when people have time to think. People are sensitive in different areas than they were before because, again, of COVID. You start looking at disproportionality in results and testing for people of color, non-white. You know what I mean? In our community are getting it higher, faster. The highest rate and intense rate of COVID positive testing is in prisons, right? And so we've got, you know, disproportionate numbers of people of color in prison. You know, there's some stuff that we need to have real conversations about that if we don't, then we won't actually be able to fulfill what we need to do. You know, so again, being intentional, I hope you can, being intentional and making sure that we're doing things that are uncomfortable to do. If you want to look good and look whatever your good definition of good is, I know I'm on the phone and on this call with 3 women. So whatever your good is, physically, your you know what I mean, your physique, whatever that is, you're not going to accidentally get there. You're not going to accidentally get there. You're going to have to do some hard work, some running, some treadmill, some lifting weights, some changing your diet, some intentional work to get the result. You might have a good day like me. I get on the scale and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm down 5 pounds." The next thing you know, I'm eating like Oreos at midnight, watching Netflix, and then I'm surprised when I'm up 3 the next day, right? And so intentionality will get you to the result. If we want to have the beloved community where we are not, again, just kumbaya, we can have real conversation because real conversation breeds change and unique opportunities for creative growth. We need to do that. We need to do that. I've talked so much. I don't apologize, but I do at the same time. I think my music is like the Grammys, where like your speech is too long, like the people start bringing music in, so a car drove by, booming their system saying my time of talking is up.
I see. I see. Patty, do you have any questions, comments for Curtis at all? Yari? Patty? Go ahead.
Patty, you said it right. Sorry about that. No, I'm good. I found everything very interesting.
Thanks for coming. What's up, Patty?
Patty, you had something?
Sorry, I heard Patty. I'm sorry. These are still awkward, and I've been doing these FaceTimes and Zoom meetings for, months. I just wanted to thank you, Curtis, and I think we do need to be listening more. And I really, really liked what you said about intentionality. I wanted to just offer, I find it really difficult. I work with PA Career Link, their youth program. So we're working with youth that are struggling to find employment. So I see, I could spend days talking about just some of the large discrepancies between race, socioeconomical, and then trying to connect in our communities. It feels overwhelming when you're looking at these big, big changes, and I do agree they need to start here. I just want to add, there's so much I want to add, and I'm trying to just quick bullet point. I think intentionality about researching, studying, shutting your mouth and listening, being educated, so that there is a change in your theology or, philosophy on how you view the world and how you view each individual, whether it's race or education or disability. My husband and I have been spending about 5 years down in the homeless community at Erie, the Erie City Mission, and that was just an intentionality to go sit with the homeless because we could sense we had feelings that were really negative about it. And it's been through that we've been able to change and know these people as incredible, beautiful, valuable, purposeful people in our lives. And that's also broken down all types of mental health stigmas that I've had, racial stigmas that I've had. So I guess I just want to add to intentionality. It's one thing to get the warm fuzzy feelings when you see a homeless person and perhaps throw them, a quick meal. It's another when I'm going to come be in your world, and I would invite you to be in mine too. Meet my husband, meet my children, tell me about your world. So I just wanted to offer that, and I'm working on that too. We had a friend, beautiful Black woman, live with us for 4 years, blew my mind on my own racism. So I'm doing some hard work on educating my family, on educating my friends. It's uncomfortable. I want to learn more. I will share. I just wanted to throw out, I don't know if anybody knows Lisa Sharon Harper. Anybody know her?
Who is it? What's her name?
Lisa Sharon Harper.
Name sounds familiar, but I don't know.
She is an advocate, author, speaker. She just recently did a podcast with Jen Hatmaker, and it's called White Women's Toxic Tears. So I just wanted to throw that out for you ladies.
Absolutely.
It's a very uncomfortable but necessary conversation to have. So I just want to thank you. I want to be a part of what's going on in our communities and breaking down barriers, learning, being a part of connectedness, because you're right, the community services are so hard to connect. I don't understand it sometimes. Like,
yeah, it's crazy.
We're supposed to be wrapping around these people, our community, our people. And so I know we're limited. I'm sorry. Now I'm preaching. I just want you to know I'm here.
I'll pass the offering basket around because you really are preaching, bro.
I was trying not to go amen a couple times, Curtis. Okay.
Me too. Patty, if you leave your email to Jessica Nugent, privately chat it to her. She's our outreach coordinator. We can make sure that you get our calendar of what we're doing. I know we have a youth summit coming up really quickly in August. Do you remember the dates, Curtis?
August, what is it, 14th through 16th? I'm not sure. I think Jill's on. She might know off the top of her head, but it's around that 14th through 16th of August dates.
And
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
And so we'll have a group of youth over at Frontier Park at the Leaf, and we're always looking for adult volunteers that can come and be impactful with them and have a discussion with them that have a different perspective, and just trying to group kids together and have them go out in the community and be impactful and learn these things, because we have to start somewhere. And I think that 13 to 21-year-old range is still very they're making up their minds of who they are, and we can affect them because they're not so set in their ways and their thoughts yet. So I think like right there, that's that generation that we can totally make impactful change, I believe. So
well,
right.
Let me say this, and I think if I can just close out my part again real fast. One of the things too that we're doing is a community garden on 19th and Walnut, and it's just really open, free. We're partnered with the Sisters of St. Joseph Neighborhood Network. So we have the property from them that was kind of granted to them, and then they granted it to us. So we kind of do our own thing, and I'll just throw a little bit of picture of like some of our vegetables that are growing, and we're getting kids. I don't know if you can see it. We've got a meditation and prayer and reading area that we're putting together. And so it's like garden meets artwork. We have a couple of installations we put up of artwork meets playground, kind of a park space. So you would be surprised how many people walk by this street drive by this street that looked totally different, raggedy car to literally a Porsche truck and everything in between, saying this is a beautiful space. I've walking pit bulls and chihuahuas in walking through here. You know what I mean? White, black, some you can that maybe more of a transient or homeless experience they're having versus someone who, you know what I mean, has got like the latest Jordans on, you know what I mean, or whatever. But this space is becoming a unifier in this neighborhood. And it's kind of ironic because there's so much life here right across the street from the cemetery, which is kind of an interesting, wonderful irony. And now my final closing with this is, you know, as a pastor and a politician, we have 8 closings and summations to all of our speeches that we give. You mentioned, Patty, about being the overwhelming nature or the overwhelmingness of the venture that we are talking about to become that beloved community. I don't remember where this story came from, and this is going to be the Curtis Jones Jr. version of it. But there was an old man who was walking along the seashore, and there were a bunch of starfish on the side of the beach, right? And he's picking them up, throwing them one at a time, couple at a time, throwing them back into the ocean. And the younger guy comes in, you know, he's got young people, we always got all the answers, technology, you know, telling old folks what you're doing, you're moving too slow, why you doing that? He said, man, what are you doing? He said, there's millions of them, you'll never get them all in there. It doesn't even matter. What you're doing doesn't even matter. And the older man picked up a starfish and threw that one back in the water and saved its life. And the old man said to the young man, it mattered to that one. And so we cannot take on the work of changing the world, but we can change our world. You can change your sphere of influence, your friend network, and purposely integrate it. And I don't just mean racially or ethnically, but integrate your sphere of influence, your people. And I think if everyone does that, then it quantums out. And I do my space, you do your space, Jessica does hers. And before we know it, we've actually changed the entire world because everyone's changed their world intentionally. You might not get everyone, but the ones you get, it means something to them. So that's the way I want to kind of end our conversation on this topic today.
Perfect. Next week on Wonderful Wednesdays with Wendi Wotecki, we're going to have
serious alliteration. Like that's a literary device.
I did not name it. I promise I did not name it. But anyhow, it's going to be SafeNet, and they're going to begin talking about their programming with their homeless mothers that they have put in housing that don't necessarily have to have an abuse issue going on, that is just a homeless teenage mother, and how they are effective in that community and who they're trying to partner with. And as career link, so, you know, I'm looking at Patty going, hey, hey. So that's going to be their discussion next week. And then I hope to have Curtis back again to continue this conversation even some more as we are really starting to ramp up going back to school. I can't address school issues till we have more guidance from school. I believe breaking news, Dr. Levine just had it passed by Wolf that we have to now, the order is signed that we have to wear masks when we leave our home. Takes effect immediately is my breaking news. So that's okay. We're going to do what we need to do to protect.